The scripture today is from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in the days of Herod the king, there came Magi from the east to Jerusalem. And they were saying, "Where is the king of the Jews who has been born? For we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him." But when Herod the king heard it, he trembled, and all Jerusalem with him. So he gathered together all the high priests and the scribes of the people, and he kept asking them where the Christ would be born. And they said, "In Bethlehem of Judah, for thus it is written in the book of the prophet, even you, Bethlehem of Judah, you are not insignificant in the eyes of the kings of Judah. For from you shall come out a king who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and he learned from them at what time the star appeared to them. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said to them, "Go and inquire very carefully concerning the boy. And when you have found him, come back and let me know, so that I also may go and worship him." When they had heard from the king, they went away. And behold, the same star that they had seen in the east was going before them, until it came and stood just above the place where the infant boy was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly. And they entered the house and saw the infant boy with Mary, his mother. And they threw themselves down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and offered to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And they told him in a dream not to return to Herod. So they departed to their own country by another way. So ends the reading. In the Christian calendar, January 6th is the Feast of the Epiphany. It's the 12th day of Christmas, the end of Christmastide. Depending on what Christian theology you follow, the Feast of the Epiphany commemorates either the three Magi's visit to the infant Jesus about a year after he was born, or the Epiphany signifies the public baptism of the adult Jesus by John the Baptist, about 30 years after his birth. Both events essentially mark the same thing: the introduction to the world of Jesus as the Son of God, God in human form, a divine human. An epiphany, in its strictly religious sense, is when the divine reveals something to a person or to humanity. In a more secular sense, an epiphany is a sudden realization. It might be a realization of the big picture, or a realization of something hidden, or a realization of the missing puzzle piece. You might see clarity in the midst of chaos, or find a true meaning, or a heart's desire. You might recognize a calling. It could be the realization of the reason why something happened. Epiphanies can be monumental or barely discernible, but they can change everything. Always a surprise, they creep up on us when we're not paying attention, appearing to be serendipitous, but in fact divinely designed and deployed. When the poet William Wordsworth wrote about epiphanies in his masterpiece, The Prelude, he describes them as sometimes arriving by chance collisions and quaint accidents. They are as indelible as they are fleeting, mere glimpses of the eternal or transcendent. Wordsworth described them like a strobe of light that gleams like the flashing of a shield. The Christmas celebrations around the end of the calendar year include the 4 weeks of Advent, then Christmas, and finally the Epiphany on January 6th. During the Advent season, we are asked to keep awake, to be watchful, to be alert, and look for signs of what is coming next. To look for signs. The Advent period of waiting, watching, and preparing ends with the celebration of the birth of Jesus, which symbolizes the coming of Christ consciousness. The Christmas celebrations conclude with the Epiphany that was experienced by the three Magi, God in human form. You might think of an epiphany as an aha moment, or an instant when that light bulb goes on. Epiphanies are relatively rare occurrences and generally follow a process of significant thought about a problem. Often they are triggered by a new and key piece of information. But importantly, a depth of prior knowledge is required to allow the leap of understanding. Famous epiphanies include Archimedes' exclamation of "Eureka!" when he discovered the method to determine the density of an object. Isaac Newton, when he realized that the falling apple and the orbiting moon are pulled by the same force, gravity. It is interesting to contemplate whether or not there is a difference in a divine epiphany and a secular one. We believe that God is omnipresent and omnipotent. But with this belief, every occurrence includes God, and therefore every epiphany would be divine. The human understanding of gravity is as much a part of human consciousness as the understanding that we are all one and part of God. In our vocabulary, we distinguish between scientific knowledge and a spiritual awakening, but they all come from God, the divine source of everything, seen and unseen. In the scripture reading today, the three kings see the star when Jesus is born, and they knew that it symbolized the birth of a new king. It took a year to follow the star and to find Jesus and his family. Note that the wise men did not immediately experience the epiphany, knowing that the new king was God in human form. It occurred months after of travel, following a star without much information. When they finally see the new baby Jesus, the epiphany occurred. They knew that the human baby was part of God, and therefore all humans are. In their travels to find Jesus, King Herod told them to locate him and tell him where he was. The three kings were told in a dream not to return to Herod, and so they returned to their own countries using a different route. The scripture readings today were verses 1 through 12 of Matthew chapter 2. Verse 13 reads, "When they, the three kings, had gone, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said to him, 'Arise, take the infant boy and his mother and flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is ready to demand the child in order to destroy him.'" In our faith tradition, we might also call Joseph's dream and the Magi's dream epiphanies, messages from Spirit, or divine inspiration. I don't think it makes a difference if we call these types of events divine inspiration, messages, or epiphanies. What is important is that the epiphany, the event we are celebrating, was the realization by the three wise men that God is present in every human. It is important to note that it was three wise men who were prepared and able to interpret the guiding star and understand the divinity of Jesus. The epiphanies, the divine inspirations I have mentioned, required preparation, faith, and action on the part of the Magi, Archimedes, and Newton. Each of us has the ability to be aware of divine inspiration. I'm sure we've all experienced those flashes. Can we do anything to promote this ability? In the scriptures, the wise men needed faith in their belief to follow the star. They needed to do the planning and physical work necessary to follow the divine inspiration. At the end of their journey, they experienced the epiphany. The same process holds for our individual journeys. We must do the work to prepare. We prepare for whatever the universe is trying to reveal to us. There are small intuitions and hunches that we receive all the time, and we decide whether or not to follow up on them. I was an accountant in my past life, and during a tax season one year, as always, you're looking for people that can work part-time, but they know what they're doing because you got to staff up. And I was sitting there and I really busy, but I sat down, I was reading a metaphysical book. I'm in my living room, I'm reading, And I got to a point where in the book it said, pay attention to what's happening right now. We've all heard this. But when I read it, it was like someone was talking in my head. It was like someone really told me this, pay attention right now. And I stopped. I looked around the room and there was a heater vent right down on my right side, off the side of the couch. And there was a piece of paper floating in the air from the heat coming up. It was just floating there. And I reached out and held it. I looked at it. And a few days earlier, I'd had a message left on the answering machine. I forgot about it. Totally forgot it. And all I've been doing is looking for people, and I forgot about this message. So anyway, I ended up calling the lady. She was a retired accountant, had all the experience in the world, and would work any hours I wanted to work, but not full time. I'll come in the morning, I'll come in at night, I'll come in all year. So anyway, she worked for 5 or 6 years. For some reason, when I'm reading that book, it wasn't me just reading the book. Something spoke to me. As we begin this new year, many of us are wondering, perhaps anxiously, what 2022 will bring. What will it bring your way? Here are a few thoughts that most of us think sometimes in our lives. There are repeating patterns in my life. What part of my behaviors and thoughts contribute to these repetitive scenarios? Or what would peace look like for me? What is it that I hope for? What should I do now? How will I know if I have divine guidance? How will a real change begin? These types of questions can require a lot of reflection, soul searching, and prioritizing of what is important to you. The more you work on what is important to you, the more prepared you are to recognize when an answer comes. An epiphany could be just around the corner. Around these types of issues, it may be helpful to journal, pray, meditate. Be still, be alert, be open to your intuition. If a new thought or new approach pops up, one time or many times, you need to decide what action, if any, you take. Is it just that repetitive ego mind thinking the same thoughts, or is this a new thought? Is this something inspired? It's interesting, a story I've used a number of times. Albert Einstein said, he worked and worked and worked trying to do all types of things in physics. And he would work day and night for years. But he said, it's when I was taking the shower, not thinking about it, when the answer would pop in my head. That's an epiphany. You've done the work, you've tried, but you just, with our mortal minds, can't figure it out. And then the universe hands you the answer. I know we've all had that at work. You have something going on at work and all of a sudden that's what I need to do. God is always present. Be alert and aware. There are many ways the Spirit can communicate with us. It might be a piece of paper floating in the air. It might be a license plate. Could be anything. It could be something a friend tells you and all of a sudden it just makes sense. Be open to what the universe offers, not just what you had in mind. A greater power may have a different direction for you. Clarity may take a form you didn't expect. That is an epiphany. Epiphanies are not always what we want to hear. I heard a story of a woman who went through a horrendous divorce. She survived and is stronger, happier, healthier, and surprised by a kind of joy she never could have anticipated. On New Year's Eve, she found herself looking back on the previous year. And her quote, I had gone to a friend's apartment for a very low-key night. My ex had my kids that week. I remember leaving their place right after midnight and walking the 9 blocks back down to my empty apartment. I was overcome by a feeling that everything was going to be okay. That was the first time I had felt that since the whole breakup and divorce had started. I was so glad I was me and my life was mine. I wanted to throw my hat in the air and sing, I'm going to make it after all. I don't know if you remember Mary Tyler Moore. It was really cool to realize that moment was a whole year ago. And that was her epiphany. A year after the event, she realized the significance of her change in attitude, the change in the way she viewed her life after her divorce. She went on to say, I hope that we all can have those moments this year. Some folks will argue that these kinds of epiphanies are emotional or intellectual, that they occur outside the realm of the religious or the spiritual. If we go back to our faith principles, we believe God is omnipresent. We believe everything is God. There's naught else but God. The infinite intelligence of the universe. We don't believe in God as a superhuman sitting up there taking notes. We believe all this intelligence that makes the universe work, the consistency, is a higher power. When you realize that you are happy in your own skin, that you are where you are meant to be, that you are glad to be rid of something or someone that was unhealthy in your life, and everything is going to be okay, despite all kinds of evidence to the contrary, you have experienced profound truth, divine truth. This realization is not just intellectual. You can feel it in every fiber of your being, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We can prepare ourselves for these occurrences of divine inspiration. They usually occur when one's mind is not focused. You're not focused on problems, fears, or day-to-day tasks of life. When you can quiet your emotions, slow down your thoughts, when thoughts are not constantly running through your mind, your consciousness can be drawn to an awareness of a new insight. On this celebration of the Epiphany, even if the Christian tradition is not yours, be on the lookout for what John Milton called everyday epiphanies. For those flashes of clarity, insight, truth, and light that can change forever how we experience life in the world. When the Epiphany, the aha comes, and it will, seize it and hold on tightly. This is important. Hold on tightly even after the glimmer of the Epiphany is gone. Spirit is not aware of time or space. Our souls hold on to that truth. Journal them. Blessings.